Pessoal, tudo bem? Tudo certo com vocês? Sim ou não? Sim. Então tá bom. Agora sim. Pessoal, muito bem-vindos ao IED. Meu nome é Fábio, para quem não me conhece, eu sou o Fábio Amado. Para quem me conhece, eu também sou o Fábio Amado. Enfim, o ponto é o seguinte. Eu sou coordenador aqui do IED, eu dou aula, sou professor e coordenador, estou com esse chapéu aqui, do curso de Design de Serviços, que a gente tem um programa de One Year aqui, mais para frente eu falo um pouquinho. E foi muito legal fazer parte, é muito legal fazer parte do IED em si, para abrir a porta para eventos como esse, né? Então, trazer a galera da SDN aqui, parceiros de longa data, o Wilton, o Luiz e outras pessoas que não estão aqui com a gente, mas que fazem parte do board brasileiro da SDN. Então, é muito legal abrir a porta e ver bastante gente da comunidade aqui presente para ver um conteúdo bem legal, que tenho certeza que todo mundo vai gostar. Bom, vamos lá, rapidinho, falar um pouco do IED, né? O IED São Paulo, ele está aqui disponível para qualquer pessoa que queira entender um pouco mais sobre design, qualquer vertente do design em si, né? Tem uma série de cursos aí muito interessantes, legais. Acho que o Design de Serviços é um dos mais legais, aliás, com inscrições abertas, inclusive. Acaba sendo um diferencial bem grande para a gente aqui fazer o Design de Serviços, porque é o segundo curso, assim como a pós da Positivo, foi o primeiro curso aí de Design de Serviços, uma pós-graduação super legal também. A gente conseguiu montar uma grade bem interessante, com bons profissionais dando aula aí durante um ano, né? Mas daqui a pouquinho eu já chego lá. Eu vou falar para vocês um pouco da nossa agenda. Eu estou fazendo essa abertura muito mais para recepcioná-los aqui, das boas-vindas, e depois passar a bola para os meus colegas aqui, passar para o Wilton introduzir nosso convidado, o Jesse Grimes, que vai falar um pouco sobre algumas tendências aí, uma palestra bem interessante que rodou na última Global Service Design Conference, que foi em Toronto. Foi bem interessante, foi bem legal. E também depois a gente traz o Luiz aqui, o Luiz Alt, justamente para poder falar, fazer alguns questionamentos, né, para o próprio Jess responder, trazer o ponto de vista dele, de acordo com algumas questões aqui que a gente formulou, para no final a gente abrir para vocês questionarem. Então, durante a palestra, durante o talk, quanto mais se tiverem anotações aí de perguntas que vocês queiram fazer, por favor, acho que é super válido. Já vou dar a dica de letra, de cara, assim. Dica não, acho que é um pedido, né? É muito importante que a pergunta seja uma coisa muito aberta e que seja de interesse comum, né? E na hora de perguntar, por favor, sem palestra, tá? Porque a gente tem um tempo meio curto para isso, então fazer aquelas perguntas objetivas, diretas, que eu acho que todo mundo sai com um conteúdo interessante, com mais possibilidades de usar bem o nosso tempo aqui, o tempo do Jess, durante as conversas. Beleza? Acordo? Certo? Agora sim, falar do One Year. O One Year é um projeto que a gente tem já mais ou menos há 2 ou 3 anos. É um curso que a gente está indo para a 4ª turma, que vai abrir agora em abril. Ele passa por uma série de etapas do processo de design, né? Só para entender aqui, quem trabalha com design de serviços hoje, ou como consultoria, ou como empresa, tanto faz, que trabalhem, sim, levanta a mão, só para a gente ver. Olhem para trás, amigos, para vocês se reconhecerem aí. Legal, bacana. Então, interessante. Hoje em dia, a gente vê que cada vez mais o nosso mercado está crescendo bastante. Isso é super interessante, super bom, né? Porque, querendo ou não, a consequência são bons serviços e boas experiências aí na rua para a gente, né? E esse curso a gente fez pensando justamente nisso, né? Como é que a gente consegue fazer com que a demanda que o mercado pede por tantas pessoas, por tantas áreas novas dentro de experiência do consumidor, a gente precisa deixar cada vez mais as pessoas, nós profissionais, bem preparados. Então, a ideia desse curso é justamente isso. Então, é um programa de 1 ano, né? Ele vai de abril até abril, passando por todas as etapas, desde construção de mindset sobre o que é a jornada de serviço em si, né, até a fase de liderança no design em si. Né? Como é que, depois que eu sair desse curso, o que de fato vão ser as minhas responsabilidades e como eu posso atuar como bom service design no mercado em si. Né? Que mais que eu tenho para falar do curso? Ele sempre tem um módulo internacional, isso é bem legal. Na primeira turma a gente foi para Madrid, segunda turma a gente foi para Toronto, agora a gente está indo para Madrid com a terceira turma e a próxima provavelmente vai ser Toronto. Então a gente fica meio nessa intercalação aí, justamente para sempre buscar um ponto de vista de um outro mercado para ver o que as outras empresas lá fora estão fazendo. E eu acho que a gente, aliás, por experiência própria, a gente está nadando muito na frente de muitos mercados aí, europeus ou até mesmo do canadense. Então, parabéns a todos vocês. Quem tiver um pouco mais de dúvida e quiser entender um pouco mais sobre o programa inteiro, pode me procurar. Na parte de conteúdo é comigo, eu falo direto com vocês. Mas quem quiser entender sobre custos, essas paradas que não envolvem a minha pessoa, eu vou apresentar a Marjo, que está ali no fundo, dar um tchauzinho aí para quem tiver interesse. É só falar com ela sobre partes mais burocráticas. Então, acho que é isso. Vou passar a bola aqui para o Wilton. Certo, Wilton? O Wilton, para quem não conhece, é o sócio fundador da Kivo, um dos principais escritórios também de design de serviços que a gente tem aqui no Brasil. Fala mais de você depois. E é isso aí. Obrigado, gente. Obrigado pela presença. E aproveitem aí o espaço, o tempo de vocês, o tempo do Jess, para ouvir sobre novos conceitos, aí, tendências para a nossa área.
Obrigado, Fábio. Boa noite a todos. Obrigado, IED, por nos receber, o pessoal da SDN Brasil. Bom, eu vou apresentar o nosso convidado de hoje, que é o Jesse, tá? E falar um pouco mais da SDN Brasil. Também queria saber quem conhece a SDN Brasil. Podia levantar a mão, por favor? Bastante gente. Bom, o Jesse ele é um especialista em design de serviços, com 13 anos de experiência no campo. Trabalhou em Londres, Düsseldorf, Sydney, e agora tem um projeto aqui, porque tem um projeto aqui em São Paulo. Trabalhou com grandes marcas globais, incluindo ING, ABN AMRO Bank, Rabobank, Philips, Optus, Vodafone, Orange e outros, além do governo holandês. É vice-presidente sênior da Service Design Network Global, editor-chefe da revista Touchpoint e também é credenciado como Master Design Service Trainer. É cofundador e chefe de treinamento da Service Design Network Academy. Queria avisar para vocês que a palestra não vai ter tradução, tá? Estava lá no informação no site e algumas informações interessantes. Nós somos o braço de representação do capítulo Brasil da Service Design Network. Nós somos uma instituição sem fins lucrativos com o objetivo de divulgar e promover o design de serviço globalmente e principalmente no Brasil. Somos abertos a contribuições de todos vocês. Assim, tem a comunidade, vocês se registram no site da Service Design Network, não precisa pagar, vocês podem fazer o Community Membership e começar a contribuir com a rede da forma que vocês puderem contribuir. Existe um núcleo, como que nós estamos aqui, eu, Luiz e algumas outras pessoas que não estão aqui nesse momento, mas que tentam organizar palestras, eventos, publicações. Quanto mais pessoas puderem colaborar conosco, é importante, porque o nosso trabalho é pro bono, a gente para um pouco do nosso dia, das nossas tarefas, dos nossos negócios, para poder se dedicar à construção dessa rede. Esse trabalho, a SDN Brasil, ela foi fundada em 2013, e a gente vem fazendo eventos anualmente. A gente sabe que está muito aquém do que a gente gostaria de produzir, e o problema se dá por colaboração, né? A gente, no final, acaba 3, 4 pessoas tentando fazer todo esse trabalho no dia a dia maluco que é o nosso. Então, quanto mais colaboradores nós tivermos, é importante. Até para acabar com uma estigma que a SDN Brasil é uma panelinha, que a gente de vez em quando escuta, assim, não é panelinha, a gente pode se juntar ao caldeirão, né? Que a gente está aberto a isso. Falar um pouco da revista Touchpoint. Então, a revista Touchpoint, para quem se cadastra no site da SDN, Você tem acesso gratuito aos artigos e às publicações da Touchpoint. Não, mas não tinha as edições antigas do Community que eram liberadas? As anteriores, sim. Jesse, the Touchpoint magazine are free? Exatamente, Luiz. Antes era paga, agora não. Com Community Membership, você acessa, acho que não acessa as 3 últimas edições, tá? Porque você precisa pagar. Mas você tem acesso a todo o arquivo daquilo que já foi produzido e tem muita coisa interessante ali, tá? Então, são conteúdos riquíssimos que vocês podem aproveitar. Na mesma pegada, aqui, como a gente viu, o Fábio perguntou se a gente tinha profissionais atuantes na área, e a gente viu que tem bastante. Nós queremos convidar vocês a escrever os use cases de vocês na própria Touchpoint. Tá? O Jesse falou que existe um processo formal de avaliação. A gente quer cada vez mais melhorar a qualidade dos artigos publicados e cada vez mais a gente quer artigos publicados vindos do Brasil, porque a gente, como o próprio Fábio também falou, e a gente participa nos eventos lá fora, a gente sabe da qualidade do que a gente tem feito aqui. Tá? O Brasil é um mercado gigantesco, consumidor, é um mercado de serviços gigantesco, com muitos problemas e com muitos use cases bastante criativos. Tá? E eu falo por experiência, porque assim, o Luiz manda o trabalho que o Luiz na Live Work faz e algumas outras pessoas fazem, são reconhecidos e são publicados lá fora, e já palestrou em eventos da SDN Global. A gente também, com alguns dos nossos trabalhos que fizemos a emissão, foram aprovados, e nós, além de publicarmos, palestramos na SDN Global, ou seja, falando de cases realmente de service design no Brasil. Então, é importante que vocês submetam para que a gente conheça esses trabalhos e possa publicá-los. Mais uma informação, que é o Community Knowledge. O Community Knowledge está disponível dentro da SDN e é um lugar também para que vocês troquem informações. Tá? Publiquem, se os artigos não forem publicados especificamente na Touchpoint, eles podem ir para um espaço que é o Community Knowledge, e essa troca é muito rica. Como toda rede, o objetivo é fomentar cada vez mais a interação e troca de experiências. Bom, gente, era isso que nós tínhamos para falar da SDN Brasil, então, sem mais delongas, obrigado por vocês. Eu quero convidar a Jesse, please, your stage is yours.
Obrigado. Boa noite, tudo bem? So, I've been living in Sao Paulo for about 4 months, and I'm only learning a bit of Portuguese. So I appreciate that you're allowing me to speak English. I'll speak slowly. If you want me to speak more slowly, then wave your hands. First, I'd like to thank Hilton and Luis from the SDN chapter here in Brazil for giving me the opportunity to talk, and also to IED for hosting us this evening. So, I guess what I'd like to do is share from my perspective things that I've seen as trends in the world of service design. I've put together this talk in 2 parts. First are trends, my observations, and then some questions that they've triggered in my mind. And a second part to introduce you also to the global organization of the SDN. You've heard from Hilton some of the things we do and some of the local chapter activities here, and I can tell you more about the global organization. So, a little bit of the context of who I am. You heard the introduction, but this is also describing why I think I'm in a bit of a position to make some of these observations. I've spent about 13 years doing service design specifically, and about 21 years as a design consultant and strategist before that. Or in total. I've worked around the world. I'm based in Amsterdam at the moment, but as you can see, I'm also working with clients that are in different locations. I do, as you heard in the introduction, have a lot of experience in the financial sector. I think if you would take a random sample of 10 service designers around the world, 7 of them are probably working in banks. It's kind of indicative also of my background. But in the last months, I'm working for a client in the agriculture sector here in Brazil, so that's been a little bit of a change. And another focus I've had in the last few years has been on the value of service design for innovation context, for startups, for accelerators, for incubation labs. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and it touches on one of the trends that I'll get into. But I think one of the most specific roles that I play that gives me a feeling of what's happening in the service design world is that I've been editing Touchpoint for quite some time. So I have a perspective on who wants to write for Touchpoint, what their topics are, from the broad perspective, everyone who submits an article, through the process of getting these articles published. So it gives an indication, at least from the people who are participating in the publication, what people are thinking about in our discipline. So let's jump into these 5 different trends. The first one is that I think as service designers, we're getting more power, we're getting a greater mandate for our work, and we're also seeing that there's a lot more complexity to what we're doing. Now this happens because if you look back in our history, the first people usually doing service design in organizations were spread throughout a design team. They had maybe read some articles, they might have taken a short course, and they were building that practice and that way of thinking and the tools we do from the bottom up. Now we're seeing that service design is being practiced at scale. It's no longer a few kind of enlightened service design minds lower in the organization, but we're getting big teams of designers and big teams of service designers all practicing service design. And it's becoming integrated into the day-to-day business. It's not just small projects in one part of the business. We're seeing teams where they work on every single service experience that a service provider, that a company has. And also the challenges that we're addressing as service designers are getting bigger and more complex. In the beginning, and for sure also a lot of my experience, has been applying service design to relatively small, focused challenges within a bigger context. Within a bank, for example, improving the application process for mortgages or for insurance. Now, of course, and already for a long time, but more and more, service design is being applied to much more complex challenges, things in the healthcare space, things in the public sector and government, services that touch all of our lives, that affect our health, our well-being. And this is, of course, a different level of magnitude than improving the processes around insurance. So it's another sign of this complexity that we're taking on, that we're addressing. And those teams of service designers are big. If you look at an organization like Fjord, who are spread across many, many offices around the world, they're facing these new issues and a scale thing that didn't exist when there were small numbers of service designers spread within individual organizations. So if I take these 3 observations around this trend, what are the questions that it raises to me? And the first is actually touching on one of the mottos that the Service Design Network has, and that is that we hope that service design becomes the new normal, that it's not something that individual enlightened service designers are fighting to get recognized within an organization, but it becomes the way that organizations work. They think that our practice, our mindset, our tools are important, are necessary. But this brings with it also some challenges for us. If we're pushing, as we have for years, to have a role at the C-level within the top management of an organization, they start to ask us questions which are not usually the comfort area of typical designers. We need to start saying and calculating the ROI on a project. We need to demonstrate where we fit within a strategic plan. We need to be very comfortable with the finances and the strategy aspects of our work and not just things like journey maps. So is this something that we're going to address? How are we going to address it? We've seen also in the last years, Fjord is a good example, a whole new breed of people with the title business designer and not service designer. And I think there's interesting questions there around, are these service designers at heart? Are they service designers with an MBA role? Or are they MBA people who have a bit of a design mindset? And I've heard arguments on both sides. In terms of the complexity issue, there's also more and more an overlap, and I can think back to a conference we had a few years ago in Madrid where the world of systems thinking is now influencing service design, and service designers are looking towards systems thinking and the tools that systems thinking uses to address very complex, wicked problems. And as the questions and as the challenges we face as service designers become complex, I think systems thinking and the tools and the mindsets they have, while it's really very far from a design discipline, become more and more relevant for the work that we're doing. And also, as we scale up the size of our teams within organizations, we need to look in other places for how we manage that work. Design management has been around as a field, I think, more than 100 years. If you look back to its history in Germany in trying to coordinate the manufacturing, industrial manufacturing, they have, and until today, people like the DMI, the Design Management Institute, and design management as a profession, they look at how you organize the people, the processes, the organization, and the culture with this design management question. And it is something that we can learn from. We had also several years ago an issue of Touchpoint dedicated just to this topic. How do we grow and scale our teams? BBVA, a big South American-based bank or Madrid-based bank that's also here in South America, has a big distributed team of around 200 people applying a lot of service design techniques. And they have the challenge of making sure that the service designers are working in the same way, have similar deliverables, having similar methodologies. And addressing this challenge as we grow is really an important question. So that's the first trend. The second one, you probably, if I had asked anyone to guess what trends might be, you might have guessed that I would have mentioned AI as in delivering or driving services. Now, if you look back also to simple services and the beginning of how we were working with service blueprints, it was typically easy to understand the service provider relationship, the consumer relationship, and how to map those out. But as we start introducing and using services where AI plays a role, the design role that we take on as designers becomes much more complex. We have to work with systems engineers, developers, programmers, people who are responsible for how AI works. It's a lot more of a black box to me, certainly as a designer, than designing a face-to-face interaction or designing interaction on a screen. And there's a nice example that goes already back several years to Google and using their voice recognition and their voice assistant to make a booking at a salon on behalf of the Google client, the Google user. So you basically said, if you know what I'm talking about, put your hand in the air. You've probably heard this, yes. So it's an audio recording you hear of a very naturalistic sounding Google assistant phoning a salon on the behalf of a customer, a Google user, to organize a salon appointment, a haircut appointment. And what I find really interesting about this is that actually the service provider role is staying the same. The person who answers the phone at the salon was just a person. But on my behalf, on the customer or the Google user's behalf, is an agent who's then interacting with the service provider. And that raises some interesting questions also when you flip it around. If you look at situations where you are dealing with automated chatbots to handle questions about booking travel or insurance, how those experiences are being designed should have a service designer's perspective and tools and mindsets. But I don't know how often they are playing the role, and when they are, how much influence they really have in the experience. And as AI starts to play a role, those interactions become different, and even the interfaces through which we interact with services become different. So, for example, conversational interfaces, thought interfaces, perhaps in the future, they represent something very, very different, and something that we, I think, are just figuring out the tools to design and the techniques to design them. And as a last thing in this trend, about 2 years ago, John Maeda, who writes every year the Design and Tech Report, which is fantastic reading. If you haven't seen it, I really recommend you look at it when he publishes it every year. But he said that designers, and not now service design as a discipline is splitting into computational designers, classic designers, and commercial designers. But the computational designers was the one that was interesting me, and that's because he sees that there's a role for designers, again, not service design or UX, but designers who become very comfortable with code, who can actually get down to the building the experience and not just relying on developers to do that. And this raises some questions to me as well. So if we now ask some questions about this, and if we think about the services that AI are powering behind the scenes, who is responsible for designing that experience? If you, as a service designer, have no knowledge of the way that the developers are creating the AI, what relationship do you build with that developer, and how do you get across the service experience that you want an AI-delivered service to deliver? Is it a few top-level bullet points saying that it needs to be warm and emotional and comforting, for example? And how do you trust that the code is written in such a way, that the AI is written in such a way to deliver that? And also, if you look at the interactions that we are typically working on today, which could be face-to-face interactions, retail interactions, in-store, on devices, we have the tools to do that. We're familiar with it. If it's doing screen-based designs and things like that, and even looking towards conversational interfaces, there are, like Adobe XD, new tools that help us support that. But I think this is also reaching the limits of our tools and our deliverables as service designers to start to adequately address what these services look like and how to design them. And lastly, if these computational designers are going to be a thing, how does our education need to change? Do you need to take, as a service designer, also courses to teach you how to code, to put it very crudely? If we need to be comfortable with our interactions with developers and giving a real steer towards the design of those kind of services, how are we going to take on this new challenge of being a computational designer? So the second, or the third trend is a little bit of a change from technology and organizations to something that's a little bit perhaps more semantic, but also more organizational. And that is this contrast and conflict that I've seen between this product-based mindset and service-based mindset. And I say that it's a little bit of a semantics thing because you see it come up in job titles, product designer, digital product designer, but also product owner. And within lots of big digital organizations and .coms and things like that, this product mindset is very strong, and we as service designers sometimes find ourselves operating there. And I think it has some really inherent tensions. And as a little bit of a story, if I look back to my own experience about 4 or 5 years ago, I started working at a startup bank in the Netherlands, and I entered actually in one of the product teams. There was a product owner who was my direct client. She was the one who was meant to be, I was responsible for delivering work to her. But as I recognized the limitations of where I was, which was a product team within an organization with multiple product teams, and as I tried to make the organization aware of the value of me as a service designer, the way I think, the way I look across products or parts of the product to the whole customer experience, I realized not only was I in the wrong location within the organization, but the organization itself was structured in a way that was actually creating barriers to making a holistic experience. They had teams which really had no understanding of what other teams were doing. And when I said, hey, let's do a workshop and we map out the customer journey of your new customer who will end up using these new banking products, who will install the app, but who will for sure want to contact your customer service, who will probably try to use the login for the old banking products on the new app, we should get an understanding of this. And it was this first kind of trigger in these people's minds that this was even going to happen. They were so focused on just this product awareness that they were kind of stumbling towards designing and delivering experience, which was really going to be a bit of a failure. And actually, it was at this time I went to a meeting of Product Tank in Amsterdam, and there was a product management guru who spoke, and I don't want to say his name because this is being recorded and maybe people see it in the future, but He gave a very impressive talk about what product management looks like and all the techniques. And I was surrounded by product managers, and I like sometimes to go to meetups like this to also see what our related disciplines are doing. But at the end, I went up to him and I said, so I'm here as a service designer. I'm interested a little bit what your awareness is of what I do, and what have you heard of service design. Now, he comes from Silicon Valley. He's worked for all the big .coms you can think of, and he's written the books on product design. And he looked at me and he said, what is service design? Or what do you mean by service design? And I first was a little bit shocked. And then he said, he started to explain that he knew there was a difference between services design from an enterprise architecture point of view and service design as we all know it. But even to begin with, he was not sure which I was talking about. And then I described what I do, and he said, oh yeah, we know that. That's things that UX design or the head of design will do. And I thought, that's not... And I realized we were about to have a bit of a friendly argument, and there was a whole line of real proper audience people behind me. So we traded email addresses, and over the next day we had an interesting conversation back and forth, and we ended up a bit agreeing to disagree about who has responsibility for the things we as service designers do in an organization where there are no service designers and where service design is not even known as something. So, and the way this actually appears and the way it takes place in these organizations is these silos. I'm also in Amsterdam, where I live, is the head office of Booking.com. I know people who work at Booking.com who work in teams who are just focused on the search experience or the booking experience or the rating experience. And I've asked them, actually, do you have an understanding of the people who are going from the search experience towards payment, what's happening there? Or the people who are working in the payment experience, what the search and browse functions were like? And they don't. And I've met the past head of design at Booking.com and also asked him about whether service design plays a role there. It's not really present. There are some UXers who know about it, but there's not a role who's thinking about it. So, and if you believe that we're in the service economy, and if you understand Pine and Gilmore and believe them, we're in the experience economy, yet our mission, our work we're doing as service designers, I think is being a little bit sabotaged by this semantic issue and this organizational structure of what product design is compared to service design. So 2 observations or kind of recommendations that I have. The first is something I've written about a little bit in the past, but that is, as service designers, if we find ourselves in these mostly agile-based product teams within an organization, we're already starting on the wrong foot, I believe. We don't have, from that position, the ability to influence and orchestrate and design services from a holistic perspective. So it's my view that as service designers, we always need to be above those product-based teams and working more holistically and working more structurally. And as a last, maybe confrontational question, should all these people who are being called product designers and product owners be actually called service designers and service owners? I think that little mindset change might make a difference. Let's look at another trend, and this might have been something that also gets predicted. And I chose very specifically here the words about data-informed service design and not data-driven service design. So if we think about those devices that you're maybe holding up to take a photograph, we carry around with us things that generate huge amounts of data of our interactions in the world, who we are, our relationship with companies, even things like our health, our movement. This is an incredibly rich resource for us to understand who people are from a research perspective and to later observe them from as they go through and as they use services. And it's also giving us the opportunity, if we can be teamed up with data analysts, and I don't know how to... Okay, maybe I'll speak a little quieter. So this gives us the opportunity, if we are service designers within an organization that has data analysts, to capture and understand a bit what big data looks like. And When I was working a few years ago at a Dutch bank, we worked in the structure of customer journey-based teams, which was already a very forward-thinking and positive step. But what was even more interesting was that as a service designer, the team I was within also had a data analyst. And it was very interesting how I could work with these people to understand who all the customers were of the bank where I worked, to see behavior at a way that I could never observe as a designer, and to ask her questions that I could get answers once she knew how to dive into that data. It was something that's far beyond the qualitative methodologies that I and you are for sure familiar with, and the quantitative methodologies that are often smaller numbers and quite specific sets of questions. What you can ask of big data when it's there can be very, very powerful, but it does take knowing how to ask these questions properly to really learn from it. And one thing that, as I mentioned, this journey-based way of working can take advantage of this, because there are now a move towards, within many organizations, not the siloed approach of individual teams working only on one touch point, but teams to get together from multiple disciplines who look at the journey of customers going through the service. That's very powerful, and when you add in the big data element for the understanding of who those customers are and what they're doing, it becomes very, very powerful. Now, in terms of observations and questions to us, it is a big jump towards moving from an area where we're typically comfortable with as service designers, so that is qualitative research, face-to-face, and when it is quantitative research, again, research that's at a bit of a smaller scale, to understanding how to work with big data and how to work with data analysts that can help us. So how do we, again, ask the right questions of this data with the help of a data analyst, for example? How can we draw the right insights from that data? And then even more interesting, how can machine learning be used to help design services that improve themselves based on big data? So even handing over a little bit of our design role to smart algorithms that improve services where we're not directly involved. This also raises a question, just as the AI trend does. As we move towards this very technological approach to design, where does it leave the creatives, the aesthetic role for us as designers? I don't want personally to give up all the responsibility I have for designing services to people who are only concerned with the technology and to the technology experts. So how do I keep this kind of grasp on the design, the aesthetic sense, when it's about big data? And as a last trend and observation I've had is our discipline is actually changing. If you look at and read or hear a job title of many of our colleagues, front-end engineers, UX designers, design researchers, you have a pretty good sense from the job title who those people are, what they do, what they bring to a table in a team, what their deliverables look like, what their methodology looks like. As service designers, that might have been the case 5, 6, 7 years ago, but in the interim, we are becoming quite different breeds of people. And several years ago, I think already 4 or 5 years ago, Marcia Arico at LiveWork in Rotterdam, at least she presented it. I don't know if it was originally her thinking, but there was this proposal that actually, there are 4 types of service designers emerging, and I understand this has been still a way that LiveWork are addressing the differences even in recruitment. But they talked about there's relationship designers, there's translators, there's behavioral designers, and visualizers. And from those titles, you can kind of imagine what specialties there are. And this raises some interesting questions about the organization of teams, of how you hire people. But it also triggered me later to think on the same line, because I was applying for a job. I'm a contractor now, so I'm looking for new clients. And someone had written a job description which seemed like a laundry list of every possible thing a service designer could do, plus a front-end engineer. They wanted me to do research, coding, you name it, front to back. And I had a bit of a discussion with them, and they said, yeah, no, there's people who are out there doing this. And I thought, well, maybe I'm too old, and maybe there's an amazing new crop of service designers out there, but I think it was being a bit ambitious, and it showed a lack of understanding, I think, on their part of what role I would bring. They knew they needed stuff done, and they just wrote this all-encompassing job description. But it made me think, actually, how do we start to quantify these differences between us? And I came up with this visualization that I shared with the community and got a lot of interesting feedback. What I tried to do is say, okay, how do we map our skills that we might have strengths in one areas and weaknesses in others to show what our specialties are? So I designed this simple visualization that looks at research, synthesis, systems thinking in one quadrant, our ability to do ideation, prototyping, and interaction design on the bottom right quadrant, our communication skills, so can we be storytellers, can we visualize things, can we facilitate groups as one quadrant, and as the last, what I touched on in the very beginning, business design, design strategy, and coaching. And the way this would work, and this would be my own self-evaluation, is just to say, okay, from this skill I'd be either less experienced or less skilled, or more so. And I think as a way to communicate an individual's skill sets and strengths and weaknesses, this can be powerful. And I've had a lot of people, even from one of the big Dutch design brands, that's also a household name by now, they are using this within their design teams to map who people are and to figure out the constellation of different designers within a team working together. So this has generated a lot of feedback that I found quite interesting. But I do think it poses some questions, and that is, in general now, if we look at service design education, are people being taught with the recognition that some of their skills might be stronger in one area than another? Are people who are learning service design now getting the business design skills, the MBA skills? Are they learning facilitation? Probably. Storytelling? Probably. But maybe there's some prototyping techniques that they're not getting. So as our discipline splinters a little bit into different specialisms, and this visualization shows how that works, my question is whether academia is catching up, or are we teaching students of tomorrow a more standard and now old-fashioned way of what service design looks like, and not perhaps yet recognizing the practical differences that are happening in the field. And maybe it's also a last challenging question for this trend. If this splintering continues, will service design as a term, as a job title, still exist, or will it become more into individual flavors or tribes with different names? And is that a bad thing, or is that a good thing? So that's a little bit of a view on my trends. And as I said in the beginning, and of course, please save your questions, because I'm happy to talk about them more at the end. I wanted to give a little bit of a quick explanation of who the global organization is for the SDN. You heard also from Hilton what's happening here, and he touched on some of our local initiatives. But as a kind of a quick introduction, we have a mission statement from the SDN. Now I'm switching out of my practitioner role to my SDN role. And that is that our organization's mission is to strengthen the theory and practice of service design. And we do that through the content that we share within the community, but also the content that we create and publish. The events we hold, so events like this, a local event, but also, as you heard in Toronto, the global events that we have for 12 years already. The communities we bring together, the awards that we have, and the outreach activities that we do. So very tangibly, and I won't go through every single one of these, this is, at a high level, all the activities the organization has, not just from the global conference that happens every year and the journal that you've heard about. We do accredit trainers, so people who are teaching service design or training in service design, we offer accreditation there. That accreditation is access to the SDN Academy, which was also mentioned earlier as our training initiative. We have a lot of social media and newsletters that you can follow. There's an award program that's now going into its 5th year, I believe. So we look to and award the best of service design around the world. And at the conference every year, these awards are given out. Service Design Day, I know here in Brazil it's been very well celebrated with lots of activities. This is a really great way, if you're interested in service design but maybe not applying it yet within your work, there's always events that are opportunities, whether it's for a few hours or a half a day or a weekend, just like the Global Service Jam, by the way, to get hands-on experience doing service design. And as a last thing, you heard from Hilton, there's a case study library that was just redesigned and relaunched a few months ago. So if you want to see good examples in a very well-structured setting about what service design cases are, that's an opportunity for you. We are a big organization. The Brazil chapter is one of 46 different chapters around the world. That number grows every year, which is super, super interesting to see. And it's these local communities which I think are the real strength of the organization, because of course not everyone will travel once a year to the big global conference, but these are the places where we're sharing knowledge. And we have around 20,000 people who have the free membership to the SDN. As you heard, this allows you to get the Touchpoint archive, and there's a paid membership which gives access to everything, of which there are about 1,400 members. And as a very last thing, and this is now a pitch, I've been telling you about things that I've read in this publication. It's your opportunity not only to read it, hopefully in the future, but also contribute to it. We always want contributions from around the world. There's a very strong community for service design here for many years in Brazil. And I'd invite you to share the work that you're doing with the rest of the world. There's the process, as Hilton described, where as a call for papers is announced, you can submit the abstract, the summary of what you want to write, and that is so a number of guest editors will review that and see if it gets published. But please do consider doing that if you've got any case studies or projects or insights or even thoughts about the discipline that you want to share. And that was my last slide.
Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Vou falar em inglês, ok? Sou o Luiz, para quem não me conhece, da Livework. Tem algum recado, Fábio? Tá bom. Só roubar meu lugar. Tá bom. I have some questions, and then we will open to everyone. I believe we have about 30 minutes to do that. Yes, that's good. So first of all, I would like to know, because you introduced yourself and you told us a little bit about your story, but I think everyone is, at least I'm wondering, how did you get specifically into service design? And when did it kind of click that it was something powerful and that you wanted to do?
So I started working about 1999, working in London, and my first job title was an information architect, some very old-fashioned, maybe they're still around, but an old-fashioned job title nowadays, I think. And I did UX design and interaction design for about 12 years. But at some point in my career, I was a colleague of Ben Reason, who started Livework, one of the first service design agencies. And he went off to set off Livework. I went off to live in Sydney to keep doing UX design, but I knew what service design was at that time. This was 2003. And it was something I wanted to do, but in Sydney I had no opportunity. And as soon as I came back to Europe, to Amsterdam, I had the opportunity to join an interaction design agency, but start their service design practice. And I did it because I had felt I had reached a bit of the level of influence that I could have as an interaction designer, and I couldn't take on the strategic challenges that service designers were taking on. So I wanted to move away from a focus on one interface to the whole strategy of how the experience was being designed, and that was what triggered my switch.
Nice. And so we talked about the past. Now I would like to talk about the future. Because you showed us the specialist roles and how more complex things are getting in our field, and I would like to know if you see yourself as someone that's going to be more specialized into something, or you'd like to be more kind of like a generalist, managing teams? How do you see yourself in the next like 5 years working with service design? If you see yourself working with that?
Yes, of course. I hope I still work in this field. So I think my age and education and the way my brain works means I'm not going to get into the tech side. While I think the questions that I raised and the trends of AI delivered services and computational designers interest me, I don't think that's where I'd go. I have been playing more and more in the last years the role of coach and trainer, and I like that. I think it's something that I can bring my experience to, but it also is a personality thing that I enjoy doing. So maybe a bit more into the education and coaching role. A lot of the startups I've worked with in the last years, I'm both teaching them and coaching them, and not necessarily doing that on a full-time basis. And I like that opportunity a lot.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. So one other thing that I have to ask you is about the relationship. When we are working with projects, we don't know exactly what we are going to deliver, right? That's the basis of what we do. We have to research, and then we find out what's important, and then we think of what to do, and etc. How do you see this relationship between innovation and service improvement in the work with service design? How do you balance that in a project? Do you start with trying to read the ambition of someone that's hiring you and then deciding what to recommend, or do you just see what happens in the process of doing the project?
I think actually one of the most challenging contexts I've ever worked in has been in these innovation settings, and that's precisely because, well, for one thing, service design is much, much less known there. If you look at big organizations that have a mature understanding of design, there's the better chance that there are service designers walking around. If you look at a startup or an innovation lab in which small teams are working, you will never find service designers in those teams, almost never. If you do find people, and I've played this role myself, they have this combined mix of design thinking and service design. And while I recognize the tension between those two disciplines, I've, let's say, bit my tongue and called myself both of those at the same time. I've been a design thinking coach and a service design coach because it was a way for me to have an influence in innovation settings where they did not know who service designers are. And I think we have a really great potential to play there, because the same product-based mindset of these big .coms exists down at the smallest startups. They have teeny teams who are focused on just getting an app out the door, and if you can make a space for yourself to work with them, to influence their way of thinking, and show them what you bring to the table, I think you can have a big impact. So I do find it a very different challenge than working in a big, monolithic, large organization who will be delivering the same services tomorrow as 6 months from now, as 5 years from now. Because when you're working with a startup, there's the good chance that 1 week later, their service is totally different than it was on the current day. And I like that challenge a lot.
Nice. I saw your presentation on startups as well that you sent me. That's very nice. So you talked about design thinking. I wasn't going to ask you that, but how do you see how do they relate both disciplines? I mean, design thinking and service design. I give you my take on that. I think that design thinking is more about how we do things. It's an approach. And service design brings in the more kind of like technical service perspective, understanding how services work. So we need this kind of like service thinking with the design thinking, and then we have service design. How do you see that?
I think I have a bit of a funny metaphor to show the difference, and that is, I've never really met someone with design thinking on their business card, whereas you meet service designers with service designer on their business card. I think we have a discipline, and now I'm a bit talking from helping lead an organization about the discipline, so I hope you forgive me for being maybe either stubborn or proud about it. But I think that we are a discipline, we're a methodology. We have a recognized set of research and academics and theory and things like that. And Design thinking, on the other hand, I treat it as a mindset that can be added to the way that anyone does their work. You can be a marketeer, you can be a product owner, you can be an IT person who understands and learns about design thinking, and I think that's fantastic. I think it means that they take a designer's mindset to the work that they do, but it doesn't change their job at the end of the day. They might have learned some techniques, but they're still their same job title with this flavor of design thinking on top. I do think there is a almost fight for awareness or survival when the strength of design thinking somehow can overpower service design. In Germany and in Europe, there's a lot of schools and courses to teach people design thinking, and I worry that people feel satisfied as being, I'm customer-centered, I know how to design better services because I took a design thinking course for 2 days. I really don't want that, and I think that's valuable, but what I don't want it to do is to cannibalize or threaten our role as service designers because people think that they've become a designer by reading Tim Brown's book or taking a weekend course.
Good.
So it complements us, but at the same time, it's a bit of an existential threat.
Okay. So let's talk about those kind of like terms that you mentioned as well, in product and service mindset. I'm wondering how you differentiate both as well. I mean, what's a product to you? Because we tend to look at products, or before we used to look at products as something that's tangible, and it's not anymore. So how, in the argument you were having with this product owner, how did it went about?
I think I have just kind of a universal find and replace in my brain where I see the word product and I want to say service. And if I read the word product, I read service. And if I want to write it, I don't let myself write the word product. I think products are a way of thinking about the touch points in which services happen, but the perspective we always need to take if we stay true to our roots is a service one. And I do recognize this as, again, it's a semantic issue. It shouldn't become such of an issue, but it plants the seed of misunderstanding when it's always talked about as a product. And yes, it's no longer the tangible industrial design, product design, but it still leads to the way of thinking that product is just a single thing, that if you design the product well, that the customer's happy, that the company makes money, and I don't think that's the case. I think by trying to use the word service and tell people that we're designing a service at the end of the day, I chip away at that, and I hope it changes the way that my clients think too.
Nice. Well, last question before I pass to the audience. Do you have microphones to distribute? Yeah. Or people should come here to ask the questions?
It's easier.
Okay, so we can make a line probably here with, yeah, or you can shout. Yeah, that's fine. I think. Oh, because for the. Okay, that's good. All right. So my last question. This year we had a submission for the Service Design Award where there was AI being used to identify opportunities of changes to specific services. So it was a consultancy business. Because you talked about AI for service delivery, so we have to design considering that AI will change the service. And then you talked about data-informed design, right? A service design. And in this project, it was kind of like they were taking it further and using AI to identify places where changes would be more impactful in projects and for services. Have you thought about that? Do you think it's, are we going to be replaced or something like this?
I want to say we won't, because if I'm standing here saying we're about to be replaced, then I'm also killing my discipline or sounding a bit cynical. No, I think there's still a role for us. I have not yet myself interacted with any AI-based service that has not left me frustrated. So I think it's a long time before those things are going to be replacing me, because they can't even deliver a proper service experience. So I would not yet trust them to design them. But it's interesting you mentioned, what country did this award submission come from?
Well, I don't remember. It was a finalist. I think London, probably. England.
Because one thing I've noticed, I've done a bit of work and a lot of speaking in China, And in China, they are much further ahead than us outside China in thinking about how AI will deliver services. I spoke at a conference in Taipei 1 year ago, and another speaker at the conference was from Tencent, and she gave a presentation about how AI is delivering services for their customers. Now, the presentation was only in Chinese, and all I could take of it was someone whispering in my ear some important things that they thought I should know, and a few English words on the slides. But it was really clear from both of those things that they are in a position to be designing services based on AI that I have not seen anywhere outside China. So just an observation, it is happening. We're not seeing it very much, and it's interesting that there are some finalists. But it is happening in China, and while China is very eager and successfully learning from the service design world outside China, unfortunately, I have not seen them, and I'm trying to encourage them to do so, to share the knowledge of what they're doing in China back outside China. And they are where it's happening, and they can do that because they have platforms and reach and technological expertise that is very hard to match outside.
But there's also a language barrier. I think the submissions from China, we struggle a lot by reading them, and sometimes we can't really get what they are showing. And it's really a shame, because we look at the project and it seems really nice, and you can see that there are good work, but they can really submit in the way that we can actually get the value of it. Ok, pessoal, quem quer fazer alguma pergunta para o Jesse? Vamos lá, primeiro lá, por favor.
Okay, so you talk about doing the right questions to data, so we can measure our work in self-design. So I wonder if you could give some tips for us, so we can mark our own KPI and our OKR to approach and prove our value to the business strategy inside big companies.
Can you say one more time? I was also having...
So I'm shaking because I'm really cold.
No, it's okay. No worries.
You talk about ourselves asking the right questions to data, so we can measure our work in service design.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could give us some tips so we can measure our OKR or KPI, so we can approach more to business strategy in big companies. So we can measure our work too.
Our work as service designers.
Yes.
So Jesse, just can you try to answer repeating a little bit of the question, please?
Okay, so I think the question was, I talked about how, as service designers, if we're working with big data, we understand how to ask right questions of it. And your question to me was, how do you apply a similar approach to understanding your performance as a service designer? That's a good one, and I think it ties into the same question that we have gotten from the beginning of our existence, and that is, how do you demonstrate the ROI of service design? So, and we struggle to do that. So I also think we will struggle to be very specific on what we're delivering in our performance as a service designer. There are recognized ways like CES scores and NPS scores that measure the, let's say, the success or the happiness of customers who use our services. And I think you could tie something into that. As someone responsible for the service, there are going to be benchmarks and figures that show how successfully people experience the service. Maybe they're a way to judge our own performance. But I haven't heard of more quantitative ways of doing that are about our performance. It would be, in my mind, these end figures, which are really just the customers speaking. But it's a good question. I'm not sure a tangible way to do it yet.
Ok. Atrás de ti. Bom, ela não está anotando, então pode ir. Quer pegar o microfone ou quer?
No? Então, my name is Larissa. I would like to know how you see inclusive design incorporated in the daily basis performing activities of service designers in your projects, and what will be your 2 cents for me here in Brazil to try to convince retailers or impact retailers to look at that, or at least to open themselves to products, business related to inclusive design?
I actually think as a discipline we haven't really addressed it well enough. I went to the IXDA's conference in Seattle a year and a week ago, I think, and inclusive design was a big part of the discussion of that conference. There was a whole track on talks where the UX designers were concerned about addressing people from different backgrounds and different capabilities, and it triggered my own awareness that within service design I've only seen this being discussed a little bit. There has been responsible design and design for sustainability, but I haven't seen enough of the community talking about this. I think the challenges are the same about designing for sustainability in the sense that it's probably going to cost more and require more effort to do this, and that is always a challenge to get your client to pay for it. But on the other side, just as designing sustainably has benefits for the company's image, and it makes the designers more proud to work on those projects, I think that should be part of the argumentation on why we as service designers should also practice inclusive design. It's good for the company's image, it's good for our self-worth as designers that we're doing this and being responsible, but you will have a challenge, unfortunately, unless you work for a very open-minded and forward-thinking company to get that done. At the same time, if you're responsible for scoping what the research will be and scoping the design activities, and you build in the fact that you need a broad understanding of who users are and not only to design for able-bodied, perfectly representational people, if you build that in and you don't raise it as a question, can we do that? You might already have the momentum to create that without making it sound like an extra cost. So the question was about how if you're going to demonstrate the revenue or the KPI or the profitability of it. I'm not even sure you may need to raise that as a specific reason for doing it. That might open you up to even more difficult questions. If you approach it from the other angle, as I said, that it's responsible, that it's important, and that the designers are more fulfilled by doing it, and if it doesn't seem to add so much more to the work, maybe you don't need to build the argument. Maybe you just say that this is the way we design. I know that sounds idealistic, but I hope it's possible.
Por favor.
Hey there, my name is Jenna, and I want to make two questions. The first one is, what are the challenges that you're facing right now in your work? And maybe to give us some examples of how you are overcoming those challenges in a more practical way. So that's one. The other
Let me answer that one first, because I also want to repeat the question. So the question was, how do I address the challenges that I have in my work? As the first one. So one challenge that I've got, and specifically in the work I've done with startups in the recent years, is this quote, which comes back in the This is Service Design Thinking and Doing books, but the Doing book, and that is, as service designers, we have to love the problem and not the solution, right? This should be one of our mottos. And when I work with startups, I enter a situation where they're in love with the solution and they don't know what the problem is, and that's my biggest challenge. I go in, my current, or one of my clients in the UK at the moment is a blockchain-based startup in the public impact space, the social impact space. And they have a blockchain-based solution for which they are looking for problems. And as I join them, they know what they want to build because it's recognized as the interest, the expertise in the team. And they had an idea for finding people out there with this problem. And I have to start at the bottom and work up this difficult hill to get them to understand that the solution may not exist as a problem in these people's minds. And only through doing research, and it's in the social impact space and actually aimed at refugees in the Netherlands. They had not met one refugee. They had an idea that this blockchain solution would be relevant for refugees because the startup people all have mobile phones, they're all technologically oriented, they have a generally comfortable life, and they found this concept that really, they did not know whether it would work. I spent 2 weeks meeting with refugees in the Netherlands, understanding their context, and eventually putting in front of them some of the concept that the startup had, and there was very little match. And this, I think, often happens when startups begin with this idea for a solution they want to find a problem for. You go in as a service designer with this mindset of, okay, we're going to go through discovery and understand who these people are, and I'll help you find that out. And they did not, it was really confronting for them. So my biggest challenge with startups is they're in love with a solution and they don't even think about the problem yet. And as I go in, I need to try to change their mind, and that's often a struggle. You had one more brief question?
Okay. Yeah, maybe the second one has a little bit to do with the first one. So the second one is, I'm working right now for a big company, and I'm working as a service designer, and it's very challenging to deal with the organizational culture.
Mm.
You know, so maybe a startup, it's a little bit smaller, it has less people, it's not structured yet. So how do you have any strategy or maybe something to lighten the way of doing this in a big organization?
Sure. I've got a great short answer, and it's another pitch for Touchpoint. The issue that we're creating at the moment is on service design and organizational change. All of the articles in the issue and within the theme are precisely on this topic, and there's really interesting stories in there about how to use storytelling methods to change organizational culture, how to use small interventions within small teams that then are scaled across the organization. So look for the next issue of Touchpoint. It'll help direct you.
You are not going to answer that. Okay.
I leave it to the experts.
Yeah, right.
They've written 6 articles about it.
Good. Who else?
On a similar note, my name is Renato, thank you for talking. On a similar note, not only regarding organizational culture, but also organizational charts. You mentioned the silos, the P&L divisions. How do you overcome that in service design?
So the question is overcoming the organizational charts, structures of an organization, and how to overcome it. I mentioned journey-based teams as a successful method that some big organizations are using, and that can be one way of doing it. And that is saying, okay, we're not going to, now, it's a good challenge for you as a service designer to convince an organization to change. I'm lucky if I walk into an organization who has journey-based teams, and then I enter with it with a benefit. And I don't think I would ever change a big bank on my own to do that. But that is one approach to say, look at how can we change the way we're organized to think in the way that customers experience, to operate in the way that customers experience our service, and not have the team responsible for the app never talk to the call center people, never talk to the marketing department and the people who do the website. Maybe as an intervention, you could bring them together to do one customer journey activity and workshop and say, hey, let's all map the current experience, because I've seen many, many times when the people from the app team are next to the people from the call center, their eyes are opened very wide in a way that they have never been before. They never understood this context. And that might be a bit of to get the ball rolling towards that awareness. But I don't think you would accomplish the organizational change yourself. You might find techniques to get the awareness of our work.
Last question before my last question.
You mentioned that, can you hear me?
Yes.
You mentioned that there are some companies that are more mature on the service design. What kind of segment, in your point of view, are that? Apart from technologies, we know that they are.
Yeah. So the question was, what segments of companies are more mature in the area of service design and more open for it? I think it's the banks. I touched on it in the very beginning. I really think if you would take a sample of service designers working not in agency settings and not in academia or the public sector, but in the private sector, a very big proportion will be within banks. Banks were some of the first organizations to be addressed with and confronted with the fact that their service model was entirely changing. It was no longer walking into a bank branch and having contact with one person that could do all your business. Banks had to be available, ATMs, apps, websites, call centers, and as big complex organizations with whom you as a customer have a long relationship, they saw the value of investing in this way of thinking, in the beginning getting agencies to help them, and very quickly building teams. And a lot of the interesting work and a lot of the service designers working nowadays are in that sector. I think that's probably the most mature.
And here in Brazil, it's the same, I would say. So my last question, you've been in Brazil for quite a while now. You've eaten pão de queijo and brigadeiro. And so, yeah, he's always sharing food.
Observations of a
yeah.
foreigner in Brazil.
But I'm wondering here, what's your impression on Brazilian services, the good and the bad? What's kind of like the good one, something that caught your eye, and the bad one as well?
So the good one I took on the way here, the line 5 of the metro. Never been on a better subway metro line in the world. From a service design perspective, a design perspective, crowd management, everything about that experience, aside from the fact it's crowded, but I don't blame that on the service. The metro system works really great. Hospitality has been good. I've had to spend some time in hotels. Very hospitable. I think that's also in the nature of Brazilians to be hospitable, so that's a nice start. If I can be critical, I need to check first that nobody in the room works for Gol, for the airline. So in fact, tomorrow morning I'm leaving for 2 weeks holiday and I'm flying on Gol, and the experience of using that website is a mess. And it does not happen to be language related. I had colleagues helping me in Portuguese. How do you pay for baggage that you booked on another site? On the Gol website, it's not possible. I thought, and I wisely thought, because it was true, that if I download the app is probably more modern and well-designed than the website. And sure enough, you can buy excess baggage on the app. So Gol was a bit of a pain. But look, at Dutch airlines can be the same, so I don't think it's so Brazilian specific, but that was one charmingly frustrating Brazilian example.
Thank you. Well, I like Gol quite a lot, but that's fine. That's just me.
They're not your client.
No. Latam, the competitor. They're not our clients. Latam is. We did some projects for them. Jesse, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and being here, sharing some knowledge, very insightful, and hope you get to stay a lot in Brazil and get to see your wonderful country. He's going to travel to Chapada dos Veadeiros. And,
tomorrow morning.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Obrigado.
Pessoal, só queria também fazer um fechamento rapidinho em nome do IED. Obrigado pelo tempo de vocês. Thank you, Jess, once again. E qualquer dúvidas que vocês tiverem sobre qualquer coisa, eu acho que é legal manter esse espaço aberto. Quem quiser propostas assim, de trazer encontros legais e tal, acho que fica o microfone aberto para vocês também. Só falar com a gente aqui no IED, que a gente tenta fazer e organizar encontros como esse. Obrigado, pessoal. Boa volta para casa aí.